Hey there, my name's Drew Brashler, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to fatten up your snare on the Behringer Wing. If you're brand new to my channel, I'm all about helping you feel more confident in your production gear no matter where you're starting from. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, I have this music pulled up on my Behringer Wing, and I have this snare, and if I solo up the snare by itself, it is pretty thin sounding. And I've even done a bunch of EQ on this thing to really try to fatten it up. And so I'm just going to go ahead and press play on this guy and go to a spot. There we go. Okay, so this is the snare. So here it is without EQ and compression. Here it is with compression and then with EQ. And so as we can see on the screen here, it really doesn't go below 150. And that's, I mean, even if I took off my low cut here, it's still nothing's there below 150, which is unfortunate because I would really love this to be more of a fat sounding snare. So obviously I could just boost this EQ, but then on small little grace notes that he's doing, or say that there's a small quiet part, anything that he's doing on the top of the snare is also going to have that really big boosted low end. So that's not a great thing to do. So one thing that I want to show you is utilizing the effects section of the Behringer Wing, and we are going to use the Triple DEQ, or the Triple Dynamic EQ is what it's called. And the dynamic EQ is going to help us fatten up this snare sound in this entire mix to really bring it forward. So let's go ahead and listen to the whole band here. And you can listen to this. Right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in to actually see how we can get this thing fattened up. So what we're first going to do is we are first going to click on our insert with our snare selected, and I'm going to select an effects processor. So I'm going to choose to select my 10, just because that's where I want to place this. Now, once I've selected FX10, I can actually turn this on, okay? But there's no effect actually selected here, so it's not going to be doing anything. So I'm going to drop down this effects type, and there's multiple different effects that we have selected here. If you're on the first set of effects, 1 through 8, then you would have your reverb and time-based effects. But this part is our standard effects. So these are insertable effects. And so we're going to pull up the Triple DEQ. And so there are 3 bands of EQ that we can apply. Now, a dynamic EQ is a special type of equalizer where you can have a boost or a cut on an EQ band, but you can have that increase or decrease depending on the threshold or the volume of that channel. So what this is going to allow me to do is this is going to allow me to create a bass boost in the low end of the snare drum whenever he hits it hard. But then if he's doing small little grace notes, it's not going to be impacting that low end of the snare drum as much because he's not reaching that threshold point. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my DEQ1, and I'm going to set my attack to be 0 because I want this to be instant. I want that when the snare hits, it just to boost up a ton. And then my release, I'm actually going to leave around 300 milliseconds because the normal time that I'm finding with a snare drum to sound natural with this sort of thing is anywhere between 300 and 400 milliseconds. Now, obviously, if this is too much of an effect, you can dial the release back a little bit because then that's going to remove the EQ a little bit faster. If you're wanting this effect to be a little bit more elongated, you can crank this up even more than 300 to 400 milliseconds. The next thing that we need to do is we need to set this to below. And that's going to be that we can make a bass boost, but this bass boost won't occur until the volume has reached the threshold point. And once it's reached that threshold point, then it's going to go above, and then it's going to apply this boost going up. Now, our gain is the amount of EQ adjustment that we want to have this go up. If we have this going down, then this is obviously going to make a cut every time the snare drum is hit. If it's above, it's going to create a boost every time the snare drum is hit. Our frequency is going to be where we want this frequency to be. And then we also have our Q, which is going to be our bandwidth of this dynamic EQ adjustment. Now, our ratio is going to be how much do we want this to affect. And with our snare drum trying to fatten this up, if you have this set to 10 to 1, this is going to be the right spot. So put your ratio to 10 to 1, and then we can set our threshold to be anywhere that we want to, from 0 all the way down to -60. And again, once that snare drum hits and reaches this threshold point, then it's going to boost this yellow line up, which is the actual EQ that was applied to this snare drum every time it's hit. The blue line is the maximum amount of EQ that's going to be applied if it reaches that threshold point and above. So I'm going to mute everything except the snare top. And let's go ahead and press play. Okay, and so there it is without it. And so we can dial this in. Include more bandwidth or less bandwidth. So obviously, if I set this threshold up to 0, it's not going to be affecting as much. And if I set this down lower, it's going to be always in. So we want to set this in a happy medium where whenever he hits the drum, it's going up. And it looks like that's going to be the right spot. Now, if I increase this release, it's going to elongate the time that this EQ is being applied. If I remove the release and make it faster, it's going to make that effect a little bit shorter. Now, one thing that this is going to be doing is this is going to actually be applying a little bit of a gain to a frequency that I don't want. So let's go find it. It's right there. That ring. So I'm going to set this to below. I'm going to set the same settings, so attack of 0 and my release of about 162 for this one. And then I'm going to set my ratio to 10 to 1. And I'm actually going to have this be a cut. And this is going to reduce that ring that's happening whenever he's hitting this. The other thing that we could do is we can tackle some of the 400 hertz that's happening. So if I was to press play again on this, we can go find the 400 hertz, and we can do a more narrow cut. Not still thrilled with where that cut is happening here, so let's go find it again. It's right there. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. and turn it on. Okay. Include the snare bottom here. Turn it off. And turn it on. Off. On. Off. On. So that is a big difference in my ears. I love the way that this is making this snare sound so much more beefy. And I can even accentuate this if I turn off the EQ and the compression that's happening. If I just go ahead and mute all of these things except the snare drum, let's go ahead and press play on this and go back to that section. Okay, here is it without and with. Without, with, and then with all of these things, makes it sound pretty big. Let's go ahead and add in the rest of the band real quick. And turn it off. And turn it on. Off. And on. That is a big difference in my ears. Now, one thing to note about using the effects section of having this snare drum going through the effects section and then hitting my stereo bus is because this channel is routed through the effects section, it is going to cause a slight amount of latency. So just keep that in mind, because if you took the snare drum and put it down 2 channels and we're feeding both channels to the stereo bus and you put one through the effects rack and the other one you did not, then that's going to cause a little bit of latency and you can get comb filtering with that. That's not good. Now, one additional thing that you could do is inside the gate section, there is a single dynamic EQ band. So this is built into the channel of the Behringer Wing. So if you go and turn this on, we can get similar sound just with one of these. So we can go copy all of our settings that we had set up here. So we were plus 13, and that was about 127 hertz and a little bit narrower. And we had this on below, and our threshold was set maybe there, and our ratio is 10:1. So by doing this, we only have one band of dynamic EQ. We don't have the 3, but it doesn't add any latency to this channel. The other thing about doing it this way is it doesn't require you to take up any of your effects slots in your effects section. So keep that in mind. I hope this video was helpful for you today. I hope that this gives you a little bit more in your tool belt for being able to really sculpt the mix that you want to have with your Behringer Wing. If you happen to have any questions, please post them in the comment section down below. Also, if there's a video that you're hoping that I would make on the Behringer Wing or really any of the consoles that are out there, please put that in the comment section down below, as I'm always reading through those comments to find videos that are going to be helpful for you. If you haven't already, make sure to check out my website at drewbrashler.com. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.